A very primitive steam engine was built in Egypt way back when. Now, it didn't develop into a full-blown steam engine pulling a locomotive, mostly because there were no trains to which the steam engine could be applied to provide locomotion. But in Greece, they were using rail cars of a sort on a wooden railway track. So if there had been a means of communication between Egypt and Greece at that time, it is possible that we could have had the Industrial Revolution thousands of years early. And wouldn't that have made for a fascinating alternative history? The topic of discussion for me today is communication in a fantasy world and how to use that to increase plot tension. Hello and welcome to Just in Time Worlds. My name is Marie Mullaney. If you're interested in this kind of content and in world building in general, I do have a Discord server which you can join, the link down below. Okay, let's get cracking. The most well-known historical communication is of course what we now call snail mail. Physical letters written and sent to another person. The practice of writing a letter and sending it to someone via courier is probably as old as writing itself. But the creation of a system of sending mail without needing to hire a courier specifically for a letter, in other words, the invention of a post office system, is a different matter. It is most credible that the first postal system was implemented in ancient Persia under the reign of Cyrus the Great in 500 BCE, who mandated that every province in his kingdom would organize reception and delivery of post to each of his citizens. There was also a mail service in India under the Mauryan Empire 322 to 185 BCE. The most well-documented postal service of the ancient world is Rome, which is called the Cursus Publicus and was organized under Augustus Caesar. China's postal service dates back to the Han Empire, and Genghis Khan also got in on the mail action with an empire-wide messenger and postal system named Urdu. Sorry for the pronunciation there. It was also from Persia that we likely learned to use pigeons as messenger birds due to their natural homing ability. The birds were faster than land-based couriers, however, they were also susceptible to being eaten by all manner of predators. This was sometimes countered by sending multiple copies of the same message, with different birds, obviously. The Romans definitely used pigeons for military communications. The basics of how this works is the birds are raised at the place where you want to send the letters to, and then transported to where you want to send the letter from, and held there in reserve until you actually send the letter. For a good example from fantasy authors, George R.R. Martin in A Song of Ice and Fire uses ravens to the same effect, and he has some great in-world expressions built around them. Dark wings, dark words for messages sent via ravens, and of course there is a whole profession built around looking after the birds, which is tied into the role of the maestros. Mail eventually developed into the telegram service, and then into email, and now, along with voice and video, into social media. Mail isn't the only form of long-range communication, however. Signal fires are an effective, if limited, form of communication. Surely it is one of the great scenes from Lord of the Rings when the warning beacons of Gondor are finally lit. And yes, I know, the film deviated slightly from the book here, but it made for amazing theatre. These signal fires had to have simple pre-arranged meanings, but they could rapidly send messages over miles away. One of the oldest forms of communication in this pre-arranged veins is the talking drums, which are drums beating in pre-arranged patterns to transport sound from one village to another, especially in forested areas. The Wolof people of Senegal, the Yoruba of Nigeria, and the Akan of central Ghana and the Ivory Coast all used this means of communication. An interesting variation on this theme of prearranged signals comes from Mercedes Lackey, who created a system where there were signal towers with huge mirrors in them that would signal the next tower over using the sun and flashes in a telegram-like mechanism using a language similar to Morse code, which was, of course, famously used by the telegram system. So these are a sampling of historical and fantastical forms of communication without magic that we have used to send messages over a long range. Do you think I've missed any? Let me know in the comments. However, this channel is about fantasy world building. So let's talk about magic and sending messages. Well, magic offers us quite a few communication options. Brandon Sanderson uses span reeds in his Stormlight archive. Now, span reeds are fascinating in that they seem to be some kind of sympathetic magic. So you have somebody writing on a set of span reeds, and this is then echoed by another set of span reeds that is a whole continent away without any problem. So you could have that kind of sympathetic magic to provide communication between two locations, almost like a fax machine in the case of span reeds. You could also use magical animals to transport messages. When I was inventing a communication system for my world, I came up with a magical bird called the Bluron bird that can find anyone whose blood it has ingested. So if you have somebody's blood, then you can utilize Bluron bird, feed them that blood, and they will fly off and go and find the person whose blood they ingested. If you think that my world sounds interesting, the first book in my epic fantasy series, The Hidden Blade, Book 1, Sangwheel Chronicles, is available for pre-sale on Amazon, and its release date is 10 September 2021. There will be a physical book, an ebook, and an audiobook available. Check out the link in the description to buy. Also, isn't my cover art gorgeous? Or you could perhaps look towards a magical item. Mercedes Lackey uses the Taliesin device, which is both visual and audible, that allows people to communicate between two Taliesin devices. So it's pretty much like having a Zoom call in today's day and age. Or you could have telepathy. Now, in this, I'm going to reference an author that is new to me, though certainly not to the fantasy world, and that is Glenn Cook and the Dark Company books. I don't know how I missed these awesome books, and thank you very much to the person who recommended them to me. If you would like to recommend a book to me, please do hit me up in the comments. I love discovering authors. But in the Black Company, they use telepathy to communicate between mages. Obviously, this kind of communication is restricted to mage communication, but it still is a very effective means of utilizing communication. But how does all this affect your plot tension? The first and obvious effect of plot tension is just the time it takes for messages to reach someone. A great example of this comes from Jacqueline Carey, where the main character finally realizes who the assassin is who is coming for the Queen when they receive a letter that is a response to a letter that she sent right in the beginning of the book, but she only receives the reply in the last third of the book. If she had been able to pick up a phone and just call the person from whom she received the response, all the tension that was caused by her running around trying to figure out who the assassin was would have been lost. You can also see this kind of plot-building tension due to the delay in receiving messages from the adventure movie Air Force One. Now, this is not the best movie ever made, but it was a fun action movie. In it, there is a scene where the people trapped on a plane send a fax message to the White House with instructions to try and get the plane to descend to 30,000 feet in order to allow the hostages on the plane to safely parachute off. There's a couple of scenes where you see that fax lying on the fax machine in the White House and no one picks it up to read it. Then they cut to the hold of the plane where all the hostages are standing ready to jump, waiting for the plane to descend. When the plane finally does start descending, there's a palpable sense of relief. When I saw this in theatres way back when in the day, there was actually applause when the plane started to descend. The relief was so great. Then there's some great plot tension caused by misunderstanding, especially in text-based communication. Anyone who uses social media knows how easy it is to reach a point of misunderstanding in text-based communication and then get caught up in a devil's spiral of more and more misunderstanding, which can flare up into real conflict. And finally, for the reader, there might be the knowledge that there is bad news awaiting the character, which the character is as yet unaware of, and this can cause the reader to feel tension in wondering how the character is going to receive this bad news. In what other ways can communication be used to cause plot tension? Let me know in the comments below. But how do you decide what your communication method should be? So the first thing is to bear in mind what kind of plot tension you want to build using communication. And you need to bear in mind that you have to be consistent here. If you use telepathy in one part of your story or your world, and now in another part you want to build tension by having a delay in communication, you can't now not have telepathy. Once you've used the thing, that's the tension that you're stuck with. That's the element you're stuck with. Maybe what you need rather than all that is a MacGuffin. Maybe what you need is a once-off communication device. In that case, I'd go for an item that you can use. Something like, say, a shell that you give somebody and say, hold this under the water and shout the name of the person you're trying to communicate with, and miraculously they will hear you. But once you've used the shell, it's gone. The magic's gone. So that gives you the ability to provide communication where you need to provide it, but not be tied into a specific model of communication. Maybe you want to have communication, but you want to have not full-blown voice and video communication. Maybe what you want to have is that kind of text-based communication like we used to have with a telegram, in which case I'd advise you to look towards the sympathetic magics and some kind of replication mannerism where you can send communication from one location to another fairly easily, but it is limited to text only. So you can come up with a lot of innovative ways for information to pass quickly as long as you're happy for it to pass in text form with all of text's complications and room for misunderstanding. And that might be the plot tension you're looking to create. And finally, maybe you just want to hand-wave communication, in which case, look towards something like telepathy or devices that allow telecommunication-style communication. What are some of the great implementations of communication in fantasy that you have seen? Comment below, let me know. Also let me know what kind of communication you use in your world and what impact that has on your plot tension. My name is Marie Mullaney, and this has been another episode of Just in Time Worlds. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. Please do hit the thumbs up button if you did, and I will see you soon for another episode.